What's up everyone, Darcblade here with the next episode in my Agents of Overwatch series, where we take a look at the heroes in the game, going over their lore, abilities, pros, cons and more. In this episode, we are going to look at the warrior looking for redemption, Hanzo. Hailing from Japan, Hanzo Shimada is a mercenary and assassin, although this was not always so. Mastering his skills as a bowman and assassin, Hanzo Shimada strives to prove himself as a warrior without peer. The Shimada family was established centuries ago, a clan of assassins whose power grew over the years, enabling them to build a vast criminal empire that profited from lucrative trade in arms and illegal substances. As the eldest son of the family's head, Hanzo was bound by duty to succeed his father and rule the Shimada Empire. From a young age, he was trained for that responsibility, displaying a natural aptitude for leadership and possessing an innate understanding of strategy and tactics. He also excelled in more practical areas. He was considered a prodigy in martial arts, swordplay, and bowmanship. As time went on, his father passed, and the clan elders instructed Hanzo to then straighten out his wayward younger brother Genji. They wished Genji to help rule the Shimada Empire alongside Hanzo. When Genji refused, however, Hanzo was forced to kill him. The responsibility to the Shimada clan, as well as the pressure from the elders, forced Hanzo's hand. This act broke Hanzo's heart and drove him to reject his father's legacy, ultimately leading him to abandon the clan and all that he had worked so hard to obtain. Now Hanzo has left Japan, he travels the world perfecting his skills as a warrior and attempting to restore his honor. He wishes to put the ghosts of the past to rest and assuage his guilt and ultimately find redemption. Now moving on to look at the weapons and ability Hanzo wields. Hanzo is a 3-star difficulty defense hero. He has 200 health and average movement speed. Hanzo is also a below average target in terms of his size. He is also classed as a sniper, but is better used at long and medium ranges rather than extremely long ranges. Hanzo's primary weapon is his storm bow. Hanzo's bow is similar to a recurve bow and works exactly like you would expect a bow to work. When fired, Hanzo will knock an arrow, pull back on the string and release as you release the trigger. The player can then hold the fire trigger, resulting in the string being pulled back further or even held in place before releasing. Depending on how far you pull on the string will result in the arrow's strength being different. Pull it back to its furthest will result in the arrow dealing up to 125 damage, while a quick tap on the fire trigger will result in the arrow dealing just 29 damage. The amount of charge on the bowstring can also dictate the arrow's speed. You also need to be aware that the arrows are arcing projectiles, and thus the further the arrow travels, it will start to dip and lose momentum. You need to be aware of this when using Hanzo, and if you are aiming at faraway targets, it can be best to aim above your intended target in order for the arrow to hit. This, however, can take a little bit of practice. Hanzo can launch arrows quite quickly, taking 0.5 seconds to actually knock an arrow, while it takes another 0.5 seconds to fully pull back on the bowstring. So in one way you can fire a series of weak, short distance arrows in about half-second gap, or wait for a fully charged shot for every 1 second. Hanzo's storm bow also benefits from headshots, so landing a fully charged headshot can lead in a lot of weaker heroes' deaths. Charging a shot is normally the better option when compared to just spamming arrows. With a charged up shot, you can deal more damage, hold the shot till you're ready, and can more reliably hit distant targets with minimal drop off. Spamming arrows can come in handy when trying to finish off weakened targets that you're in close range with. The stormbow arrows are also mostly silent. Unlike Widowmaker's Widow's Kiss, foes will not clearly see where the arrow is coming from, which can be great for hiding Hanzo's location. As the stormbow's arrows are projectiles, you need to keep in mind the fundamentals of projectile weapons. For example, when firing at a fast moving target, it's normally better to shoot at where the target is going to be and not where they currently are. And lastly, a quick side tip is that the secondary fire with Hanzo can result in you releasing the tension on a charged shot with the stormbow, allowing Hanzo to actually not fire off any shot whatsoever. Hanzo's first ability is his sonic arrow. With this special arrow, Hanzo will launch a sonar tracking device at his target or vital location. It will then emit a pulsing sonar beam that detects enemies within its radius. Enemies within the sonar's location will be highlighted in red, making them easier for Hanzo and his team to either hunt down, pick them off, or prepare their defenses. Enemies who are highlighted can clearly be seen through walls and objects. The radius of the sonic arrow is 10 meters and it lasts for 10 seconds. It does however come with a 20-second cooldown. Once used, Hanzo's arrow will switch to a sonic arrow on his bow, after which it can be fired like a normal arrow from the storm bow. It really can be a handy tool for both attacking and defending teams. The sonic arrow also benefits from the enemy team not knowing when they have been marked. However, as soon as the enemy moves out of the sonic arrow's range, their highlight will disappear. You can even hit enemies with sonic arrow, dealing damage to them but also sticking the sonar effects to them as well. Some heroes though can drop the sonic arrow if it should hit them, such as Reaper's Wraith Form and Tracer's Recoil. Lastly, if you do not wish to use sonic arrow once it has been drawn, then you can either press the ability button again to unequip it, or the secondary fire to release the tension on your bow. Hanzo's second ability is his scatter arrow. Like with the sonic arrow, Hanzo will change his current arrow to a scatter arrow. It can now be drawn and fired just like a normal arrow. However, this arrow can fragment once it hits a surface, allowing the fragmentations to ricochet off objects and the environment. This can result in multiple foes being hit, or if aimed correctly, a lot of damage to a single target. The initial arrow of the scatter arrow will be exactly the same as a normal stormbow arrow, after which it will split into 5 scatter arrows, with each dealing 75 damage to a target or until they have bounced off 3 surfaces. If you have not hit a foe by the time they have ricocheted 3 times, then they will simply disappear. The scatter arrow does however come with a 10-second cooldown before being able to be used again. With the scatter arrow, having an understanding of simple geometry, as Hanzo says, can really help when using this ability. For example, firing the arrow directly at your feet will result in the scatter arrow's fragmentations going directly up. Firing at a 45-degree angle against a vertical wall will result in the fragmentations initially bouncing off at an opposite 45-degree angle. The scatter arrow can also save Hanzo and his allies from flankers and foes who get too close. Firing this weapon directly at the feet of an approaching foe can result in the fragmentations bouncing up directly into the foe. 75 times 5 damage is a lot, and enough to deal with a lot of opponents. However, there can be variables which can result in this missing, like slopes and so on, so keep this in mind. With a little practice and knowledge of maps, you can really put Scatter Arrow to deadly use. Hanzo has one achievement and trophy linked to Scatter Arrow. It's called Simple Geometry and requires you to get 2 killing blows with a single use of Scatter Arrow in quick or competitive play. This can be tricky at times as you generally need your enemies to be close together and at fairly low health for the Scatter Arrows to net you that killing blow. It is best used when fired into choke points with multiple foes. Hanzo has a passive ability known as Wall Climb. When the jump button is held near a wall, it will allow Hanzo to scale vertically upwards to higher platforms. This can be useful when you need to get to vantage points or even in self-defense. When it comes to self-defense, sometimes running up and scaling a vertical wall can confuse a close-up enemy. It can also be useful to experiment with wall climb to find vantage points, or to get to an area where the enemy may not be expecting to be attacked from. You can also edit the controls for wall climb in the options to allow it to occur automatically. Hanzo's ultimate ability is Dragonstrike. This allows Hanzo to summon a spirit dragon, which is channeled into his stormbow and fired. After Hanzo announces, or if he is an ally Hanzo,
let the dragon consume you!
An arrow will fly from the stormbow, travel a few meters, and then burst into 2 giant spirit dragons. The dragons will spiral around one another in a straight line in the direction Hanzo has fired. They will pass through enemies, objects, and walls until they have passed through the whole map. The animation of Hanzo firing Dragon Strike is 1.5 seconds, during which he cannot perform any other action. The radius in which the dragons spiral around one another is 4 meters wide, and the damage it deals is 200 per second. You need to also be aware that the dragons themselves are actually quite long, This means that even tanks who are caught in the middle of the Dragon Strike can be decimated. However, enemies can still survive if they just clip the edge of the Dragon Strike and move out of its radius. Weaker foes though will not be so lucky, even if they just touch the edge of the Spirit Dragon. The damage is also not instant, as it drains health rather than instantly taking it away. Dragon Strike can also be a great zone in Ultimate. As its radius is fairly large, it can easily clear a payload or capture point, as only the brave or stupid would take on a Dragon Strike to the face. Examples of ultimates and abilities that can help counter Dragon Strike are Zenyatta's Transcendence, Lucio's Sound Barrier, or Genji's Deflect, if he can deflect the arrow part of the Dragon Strike. Dragon Strike is an ultimate that works well with crowd controlling ults like Zarya's Graviton Surge or Reinhardt's Earth Shatter. If a foe cannot move from a Dragon Strike, they will be destroyed in seconds. Hanzo has one achievement and trophy linked to Dragon Strike. It's called The Dragon is Sated and requires you to achieve 4 eliminations with a single use of Dragon Strike in quick or competitive matches. This is tricky when used on its own, but when combined with other heroes' crowd controlling ultimates like I mentioned, it can be easily achieved. While every hero can take on every other hero in the game, there are some matchups that are clearly in a certain hero's favour. Hanzo can be a source of high damage, and thanks to his sniping capabilities can be strong against stationary heroes such as Bastion or Torbjorn and his turret. Hanzo can also pick off support heroes who may not be suspecting him, such as Mercy, Ana or Zenyatta. However, Hanzo can be countered, as he lacks reliable defensive abilities. Heroes such as Tracer and Genji can keep on top of Hanzo, and are fast enough that only a lucky arrow will save him against them. Winston and D.Va can also keep on top of Hanzo, and even if he should land a lucky arrow, their high health pools will make it hard for them to be brought down. Lastly, Hanzo can lose out in sniping battles with Widow, as his arrows are not as reliable at extreme long ranges as her Widow's Kiss. Of course, player skill should always be taken into account. Just because a hero should easily beat another hero on paper doesn't mean that will always be the case during a match. Now, the pros for Hanzo are as follows. He can deal high amounts of damage, he can reveal enemy locations, can deal high burst damage with his scatter arrow, and has a powerful and zoning ultimate. However, his cons are that he has a fairly high skill cap to master, and his damage output can fluctuate. Hanzo originally was one character, and had many of the traits that are now found in Genji, but Blizzard decided to split the characters into the Shimada brothers we have now. Hanzo now takes on the form of a more traditional warrior of Japanese origin. Taking on the bow as his weapon, he also dons the outfit similar to the ceremonial formal kimonos that samurai once wore in feudal Japan, albeit with a few more practical design changes to make it more combat worthy. His silver fox hair shows that Hanzo is of age and experienced. He is also a person that clearly has a heavy weight on his shoulders. This burden of guilt and dishonor is clear in the majority of his voice lines, as they are of a somber nature. His interaction with other heroes too shows that he bears a burden. Rarely will you hear or see a Hanzo joke, but when he does, it makes me wonder what he would have been like if he let go of his past and forgave himself. Overall, Hanzo is a high source of damage to your team, but this damage can fluctuate greatly depending on a number of factors. How good the enemy are, how good the player is with Hanzo, the map, and the heroes the enemy are using can all cause Hanzo's damage to be incredibly high or low. This being said, with practice a Hanzo expert can adapt to most situations. He is best at medium or at push long ranges. Although he does have the ability to dish out damage at close range, this is normally advisable if Hanzo's opponents are directly in front of him and not hassling him from the flanks. Scatter Arrow can deal high damage or save yourself from flankers. Sonic Arrow allows you to scout out the enemy team, and if used in conjunction with your team communicating, give away the location of high priority targets to your flankers. Wall Climb can get you to vantage points, and Dragon Strike can destroy or clear a zone location. When it comes to Hanzo's damage, landing as many arrow shots is key to success. Ultimately, Hanzo does have the stigma of being overused, but he is viable on both attack and defense if in the right hands. Anyway, I've been Darcblade, bringing my Agents of Overwatch guide to Hanzo. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.
Play of the game.
が敵を食らう。